Good morning. It is bread baking day at Sweet Urban Living. I'm Beth, your Sweet Urban Living lady, and I'm so glad that you're joining me today. Now, I've got a lot of things on my to-do list for today, including making my levain so that I can make my sourdough bread. I have some aromatherapy DIY sitting over on my table waiting to do that. But I wanted to show you this morning my freshly milled flour. Now, I have been grinding my own wheat, my own grains to make my freshly made bread for probably about 28 years. I started doing this years ago when my children were young and I was homeschooling. And I was at a homeschooling convention and there was this most amazing aroma in the air. And I'm like, they were making cinnamon rolls at one of the booths, but they just weren't. It wasn't just cinnamon rolls. They were making cinnamon rolls from freshly milled wheat, fresh milled flour. And that's so important. But first, let me show you a peek. This is freshly ground Kamut. This is called a whisper mill. I've been grinding my own flour so long that they've changed the name. They now call it a Nutri-Mill, but it's the same machine. They really do last. I've had this for 28 years. And so it's really easy to use, really easy to clean. And as you can see, you get beautiful freshly ground flour. So the reason that I do use this is because the bread today that we have on our grocery store shelves is not the bread that we ate, that our ancestors ate 100, 200,000 years ago. In fact, we're in the 2020s. When I'm making this, it's 2024. And it was in the 1920s that people started getting flour that sat around on the shelves. It wasn't a big thing to start with because people would grind their own flour. They would have someone in their village or town, they would take their grains to the mill, they would have it milled fresh, and they would bring it home and they would use it quickly. We didn't strip out the beneficial nutrients and parts out of our wheat. But because now times have changed and we let our bread sit on the shelves. We let our flour sit. So even if you're a baker, even if you're making your own bread, if you're getting flour that has to sit on the shelves at the grocery store, you're not getting all the nutrients that are meant to be there. And that's why we have such a different experience with our bread today than our ancestors did before, because bread is life. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. So it's always puzzled me. It's always made me go, why would Jesus compare himself to bread and call it life if our bread killed us? Well, it's not our grains. It's not our wheat. It's what man has done to our wheat. We no longer mill it fresh and use it immediately. We strip the fiber out, the bran out, and we sell that bran to somebody else so that we can have nice white fluffy flour. Look at that again. See the brown? And even our wheat bread today has the bran stripped out and some color put back in. We take the wheat germ oil out because if you leave oil in your flour, it's going to turn rancid on the grocery store shelf. So if you notice your bread, if you go pick up a loaf of bread and you look at the ingredients, and it's got tons of ingredients, and some of it is so that it can sit on the shelf longer, and some of it is because they've sliced the bread and they have to make it so that it stays soft and enjoyable instead of drying up and being hard. So all of these additives, all these preservatives have been added in, and the life-giving nutrients have been stripped out and taken away. We also used to ferment our dough all the time. The only way to have a rise in your bread was to have your own basically fermentation process, your own sourdough. We didn't have what we call baker's yeast. We didn't have the dried yeast. Now I use dry yeast. Don't get me wrong. There are times when a nice pastry or cake or those cinnamon rolls I was talking about that were so delicious are really good. And I've even made homemade pizza, grinding my own wheat and using my own toppings. And here's a difference too. One of the favorite things that I did was I would either make my own homemade pizza, or if we were going somewhere, we were going to a potluck, a church dinner, or scouts dinner, or whatever it was we were doing, I would make a pizza roll because I could use the pizza bread recipe and roll it up. And I got that tip from the bread bakers. I get my grains from the bread bakers. That's whose booth I was at when I smelled those amazing cinnamon rolls. So thinking about that pizza that I made, well, when my son was growing up, he could probably eat, as a teenager, he could get from one of your local pizzerias, he could get like 2 or 3 large pizzas with toppings and eat all of them himself. So when we would, go out, order pizza or something like that, we had to order a lot of pizza to fill my son up. I can remember there would be times when we would go to dinner, out to dinner, not just at a pizza restaurant, but anywhere. And I would make my son eat dinner before we left because I couldn't afford seconds and thirds and fourths because he was always hungry, always wanting more. But how that ties into that pizza is he could only, because the flour, because this is so nutrient dense, so nutrient rich, and so full of life, instead of being stripped of its life, instead of being set on the shelf and having to add preservatives so it doesn't go bad or look like it's going bad. This is full of life. And I would make the pizza. I would make what would be a large pizza on the large pizza stone, and he could only eat half a pizza, and he could normally eat 2 or 3 all by himself. So I just wanted to give you a little glimpse into why I grind and make my breads with freshly ground flour. The United States leads the world in obesity. Sue Becker on Bread Bakers talks about this in one of her blogs, and she talks about how the changes in our lives, the changes that we've made in our society of not relying on ourselves, of not grinding our own bread, grains to make our own flours, of buying bread already made, buying flour, even if you are, it's not only is it stripped of its nutrients, we tend to add in a lot of sugar. We add in a lot of things that are not healthy for us. When I make my bread today, when I make my sourdough bread today, the only ingredients that I'm going to use are my freshly ground flour, water, and salt. That's it. And it's delicious when you have a good tasting grain, such as this. This is my Kamut. When you have a good tasting grain, and you let it ferment and you let it rise, it is one of the most delicious breads you'll ever eat. So I just wanted to share that with you. I'm still on a journey. I am on my sweet urban living journey where I am doing things at home, making my own bread. Sourdough is fairly new to me, so I've been exploring. You can check out some of my videos on my latest attempts and look at how I've made a levain. I'm getting ready to do that right now. And just see my journey, because it is a journey, especially if you're eating healthy, especially if you're doing things the true traditional way and feeding your family healthy. There are a lot of stories that I have, just like the pizza, about how it fills us up, it makes us feel better, it's easy to digest. In my videos on my sourdough bread, I keep saying, I'm using Kamut, I'm using Kamut. Well, that's because we've hybridized our wheat. We've hybridized it so that it'll be pest resistant, so that it'll be drought resistant, so that we can grow more. So we have all these other things where we've changed the gluten content as well. And so now we have more gluten sensitivity. But when we grind our own flour, when we make it fresh and we use it fresh, we're getting all the healthy benefits. We don't have to add all those preservatives. We don't have to add all the sugars and things like that. We just get a nice healthy loaf of bread. And it's good for us. We don't have to eat as much. We're satisfied. My son was satisfied with half a pizza. He didn't have to eat 3 pizzas to fill himself up. And so when we eat freshly ground flour from good, I use organic Kamut. I do have red wheat and regular red wheat, organic, soft wheat, organic, and I do use those sometimes because they do make a softer loaf, but they fill us up. we're not as hungry. We don't want as much. And so that's one of the reasons I use it. And I just wanted to share, if you are interested, check out the Whisper Mill. You can grind your own grain. You can find grains online on Amazon. Look around, see if there's somebody who, I know that there's like Bread Beckers in Georgia, Azure Standards out of either Oregon or Washington. There are places you can get grain, but please, I'd love it if you check this out. If you're interested, I have an affiliate link with Amazon below, and I do appreciate your support. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I'm getting ready to make my levain. I'm actually behind schedule, but that's okay. I just wanted to share with you one of the reasons I grind, or several of the reasons I grind my wheat, and I've done it for almost 30 years. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon in another episode.